in Afrikaans there's a saying, ver van jou goed naby aan jou skade, which means the further away you are from your assets, the closer the likelihood of damage is.
Yes.
And that really is, one of our mantras is a hands-on asset management and property management approach.
Hello and welcome to the Real Good Podcast by Neighborgood, a podcast designed for the next generation of property entrepreneurs and investors, where our guests share with us their entrepreneurial stories, their strategies, and their tactics for all things business and property related. My name is Murray Clark, and I'm your host, and today we have with us an extra special guest, a man by the name of Quintin Rossi. Quintin is one of the most thoroughbred property entrepreneurs I've ever had the good fortune of meeting. He's the CEO and co-founder of Spear REIT, South Africa's one and only Cape Town specialist listed REIT. They have in excess of billions of rands in their portfolio, and they have done incredible things during their time. Quintin is a thoroughbred property guy who takes us right through his journey across his life, from beginning to where he is now and to what's in the future. Stay tuned and enjoy some of these insightful moments that he has to share. Hello and welcome to the Real Good Podcast by Neighborgood. Today we have Quintin Rossi with us. Quintin is the CEO and co-founder of Spear REIT. They have 4.6 billion rands worth of properties. They are Cape Town or South Africa's only geographically focused property fund. The man has got a real estate acumen quite unlike any other. And dude, it is so cool to have you with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Barry. And I appreciate the invite and also the flattering introduction.
Well, you deserve it, man. I want to ask you, when you were growing up and you were at school, where were you at school?
So actually, I grew up in Rustenburg in the Northwest Province. And
where you?
I went... It's quite an interesting story. I actually was initially in a convent, Catholic convent. Then my father, who was Italian, my mother is Afrikaans. And then I actually finished high school in an Afrikaans high school. So it was a proper cultural baptism of fire growing up.
Were you running around the school field looking at properties opposite the field, trying to put in offers when you were 15 years old? That's what I want to know.
Not really. A SOTI, like they used to call us back in the Hoërskool Rustenburg. I was trying my best not to get beat up, to be honest, because back in the call it mid 90s, being a English kid in a predominantly Afrikaans or only Afrikaans school, you kind of stood out like a sore thumb. So it was more about survival, but in that I also made the deepest friendships. And also learned a lot of resilience through that process.
Wow, what was it? Just the nature of the school?
Yeah, I guess the thing is, South Africa was going through a very different and almost an evolutionary process. And I don't blame the children. I don't blame the people. It's just the way that they were socially, kind of socialized, I guess.
Yes.
They'd had a different perspective, very intolerant, Got
you.
But in and of itself, I could see, as South Africa was changing, that there was mindsets were also changing.
Yes.
So, but we survived, But interesting, that school actually used to be a bilingual school, and both my father and my aunt were also in that school when it was a bilingual school before it shifted to only an Afrikaans school.
No way. So that would have been late 80s, early 90s?
So no. It would have been the early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
The property bug. You someone who has done some insane things in your career, and you're still really young. How did that even start?
So when I moved to Cape Town, I finished matric in 98, and a week later I was living in Cape Town. I couldn't afford to study full time, so I convinced a gentleman that had a restaurant in the waterfront to give me a job, even though I finished matric when I was 17. And he was a bit worried about the whole serving of alcohol, etc. And I managed to apply to UNISA and study and work part-time studying, working full-time. I saved up enough for the money to then transition to UCT, and I joined the law faculty. And I had a property law lecturer, professor, and Pope, who kind of probably was the kind of genesis of I became interested in real estate, property specifically. And, I remember asking her one day, so what happens if my avo tree's branches kind of grow over to the neighbor? Whose avos do they become? And, then it kind of started, I was trying to kind of understand how real estate, the law, and the fruit that it produces, whether that was avos, but just generally the kind of what it produces, how they kind of coexist in an ecosystem. And then sadly in 2003, my father passed away, and the girl that I was dating at the time, her father is a highly successful real estate developer. And at the time I said, well, I'm not sure if I want to become a lawyer. I was then working at a restaurant here in Kiram Street that doesn't exist anymore called Fireflies. And a lot of the advocates and judges, I used to serve them. This is now a couple of years later. And the one advocate said to me one day, he said to me, the legal profession is like a cow without milk. Whatever you do not become a lawyer. Rather do something where you can utilize lawyers to assist you. And I was, mourning the loss of my father. I was having a lunch with my girlfriend's father and her family at the time. And he said to me, you know what, you've got a bit of a trading gift. You can kind of sell stuff or you can present stuff quite well. I think you should meet with a gentleman called Glenn Mackey, who was actually one of the founders of Baker Street Properties. And but I'm not going to get you the job. I'm going to get you an interview and you can kind of kick off there. And that really is where I finished my undergrad in law and politics. And then I did a postgrad at the School of Management Studies, like a mini MBA. And after that, I went into the property business as a broker, learning to be a broker, knowing absolutely zero other than the contractual aspect of it. And that really was where I started. I started kicking the tires in Edward Street, in Tiger Valley, Voortrekker Road, Belleville. Century City was only just actually starting to be developed. So I really immersed myself to try and understand what this thing was all about. And that was the start. And it was interesting.
Where do you think that gift came from? I mean, I think, was it just natural? Were you a sportsman? Or like, you obviously understand the value of teams tremendously because you've got an amazing team, and we'll get to that a bit later. But where do you think that came from?
So I think entrepreneurship breeds entrepreneurship, right? And my father was a bank teller back in the day in Hazyview before they moved back to Rustenburg. And when he moved back to Rustenburg, he started a business, a photographic business, and started selling photographic equipment. And then he transitioned as the mining industry in Rustenburg and surrounds, the platinum industry started really exploding. A lot of retail opportunities opened up around the mines. And he then transitioned into office automation and point of sales. And he would effectively service all those outlets with whether it was watch batteries, cash registers, photocopiers. And then obviously, he was always, selling, always tendering for jobs with the mines, et cetera, et cetera. And from a young age, I used to work in his shop.
No way.
Yeah, just
that's so cool.
Helping behind the till, helping with my mom used to do, back in the day, you used to do a cash up with a little cash book, and then the next day you walk it to the bank. So that for me was really the, where I think the desire to trade, and also to try and create something probably started. But even before that, my grandfather came to South Africa from Italy during the Second World War. Couldn't speak a word of English. He became friends with the local magistrate's son and learned some English. And he then grew up and became a car mechanic. He then saved up all his money and he bought a petrol station in Rustenburg. So it was really like multi-generational kind of entrepreneurship. But it's actually, if you just zoom out and you look at my entire family, my cousins, my brothers, my cousins, brothers, we actually all are doing something entrepreneurial with our life.
Okay. So then you were kicking the tires, you were a broker, and you were learning, and which is the best way by far. Always say broking and property management are two like amazing places to learn. Tell us how that progression happened from broking into owning property.
Yeah, so it's an absolute circular story actually, because a lot of the properties that I started to do work on, specifically in Tiger Valley, we actually now own, which is crazy. It's just bizarre. And I was under the guidance of a gentleman called John McMahon, who exercised incredible amount of patience, really taught me the ropes about broking. At a point, I was became a shareholder of Baker Street at quite a young age, and I also felt like I had kind of reached a certain limit. Not that there's anything wrong with becoming a career broker at all; it's a highly rewarding career path. But I felt like there was always something. So I had something more in me to kind of achieve and to want to pursue. I then took a bit of I shot my shot like they, or took a shoot or whatever they call it. I took my shot, and in 2008, Redefine Income Fund through Madison Fund Managers acquired Spearhead Property Holdings, which at that point in time was like R1 billion fund.
Right.
And I think in 2008, R1 billion
was a lot of money
versus what it is now. And a lot of the work that I was doing in Century City actually was for Spearhead. So I developed somewhat of a good relationship with who then became my Spear business partner, Mike Flax. And we started kind of conversing, and post the three-way merger of Madison, Redefine Income Fund, and Apex High, I then reached out to Mike and then to Wolf Sessman and Mark Wayner to say, listen, you've now got a massive portfolio. I think I can make a difference in your business. And he said, okay, fine. He's in Australia for a Cromwell board meeting. When he comes back, he will meet. I didn't really realize that I was meeting with him and Wolf Sessman and David Rice and Mark Wayner. And that was my moment to pitch my plan. And fortuitously, they bought into the plan, and they offered me the position to look after the leasing for the entire portfolio, which then became Redefine Properties, as you know, today. In Afrikaans, there's something called, like if you're a rugby player, called domkrag, where you just, you don't actually realize what you take on.
Yes.
And sometimes there's a lot of value in kind of winging it to a certain degree, but not being reckless.
Yes.
And I just took this on with as much enthusiasm as I could find, which was a lot. And started kind of integrating myself with the Redefine team up in Rosebank, and obviously the Redefine team down in Cape Town and Durban, all over the country. And we made a massive impact that year purely through a focused kind of leasing strategy and working kind of, bringing all the kind of parts of the business, the asset management, the property management, the developer management team, everybody kind of almost into a good rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
However, I guess what you also have to realize how much you're giving out from an output perspective. And for one person to drive that, for me personally, became, I kind of was faced with a bit of a choice, family versus career.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got my worldview is that, I've got to place priority on what is important, and the rest will kind of all really align for me. So I resigned, and that was actually the first time in my entire life in end of 2010, when I was unemployed. And I had always made sure that relationships for me are really important. You can't just kind of, it's not a short-term thing. So you got to make sure that you maintain longer-term relationships. I was approached by many local property guys to maybe do something with them. In my heart, I just felt it wasn't the right thing. And then one day I was standing in my dining room, and I got a WhatsApp from Mike, and he said, hey, great news. I've got some interesting stuff to chat about when I'm back in Cape Town. I'm just leaving Joburg. Let's connect when you get back, when he gets back. And I sent him a reply. I said, Mike, this is Quintin. I'm sure you've got the wrong person here. He's like, no. It's
definitely
meant for you. It's meant for you. Anyways, and we met like a few days later, and that was really the start of what is Spear REIT today.
Okay.
We acquired some trading assets, which are typically assets that property funds want to dispose of. And from an accounting perspective, they can then distribute that profit to shareholders. They don't have to retain the capital. However, in order to fund those trading assets, we had to also acquire a investment portfolio to use as the security to fund these assets, because generally those trading assets were at a higher value than the investment properties. So we went back to Redefine and said, listen, we need X amount of investment assets, and we kind of struck a deal. So we started 12 investment properties, 72,000 square meters of GLA, leveraged to the hilt. Redefine was gracious. They also gave us a vendor loan for 2 years, which we fully repaid at the end of the 2-year period. And we were quite fortunate that, being within at that stage, within less than an hour of every single one of those assets, meant that I could commit, from 8 a.m. in the morning till 5 p.m. in the afternoon to creating kind of longer term sustainable cash flows on these properties. And at that point in time, there was a bit of yield compression, and we managed to get within the first 12 months some nice valuation upside. Obviously re-geared that and then just continued to acquire assets. The 3 trading assets we acquired was the Oasis in Century City, which actually has now become quite a strong Robbie brand, and there's a bit of a story behind that, which I'll touch on. And then also the Upper East Side Hotel, which we then converted to the DoubleTree by Hilton, which was our kind of foray into the hotel space, which also has been an interesting ride. And then we also have a farm out in Somerset West, which is now within the urban edge. It's about 23 hectares, which we intend to develop a residential estate that falls out of our listed business.
Got you.
When we kind of packaged the whole IPO, taking land risk just wasn't the kind of narrative that we would want to kind of put into a 800 million market cap type of listing. And then we sold Oasis to Robbie, our stake. We had 50% because Robbie wanted a retirement brand within their stable. We utilized the cash from that disposal, and we just doubled down on our industrial portfolio. And we just went and bought as much industrial as we could, which has just been a huge underpin to our business. Fast forward to about 2014. So we started with about a 350 million rand portfolio. By 2015, early 2016, we scaled that portfolio to about 1.4 billion. And the Western Cape really was setting itself apart consistently as the investment case for South Africa. And then obviously we went on to list Spear, and I can touch on more of that.
I want to ask you a few more questions. How important, because you guys are the only geographically focused property fund listed on the JSE, right?
Correct.
How important, and it's Cape Town, so it makes it really cool. I don't see anyone like shouting from the hills, Joburg geographically focused at the moment. 100%. And I say that, and I dig Josie as well, but Cape Town obviously now has a special place because it's home. How important was that focus to you in creating geographical focus? I mean, you're talking about being an hour away from your properties, and as a result of that, being able to create value, which I'm all for completely. How important was that?
So it was really important. And, in Afrikaans there's a saying, ver van jou goed, naby aan jou skade, which means the further away you are from your assets, the closer the likelihood of damage is.
Yes.
And that really is, one of our mantras is a hands-on asset management and property management approach. So we've seen that, as a hallmark of that approach, we've had a 90 to mid 95 to 98% occupancy rate since inception. So from 2011 till 2023, our occupancies have never dipped below 90%. And that's a result of early engagement, et cetera, et cetera. When you are one layer removed from your assets, it becomes very difficult. And I look back into the depths of COVID. We had one region to focus on. You take a property fund that has got multiple jurisdictions, multiple provinces, multiple cities. I mean, things are just happening everywhere at a rapid rate, and you don't have control. And I think that by design for us, it was important to only focus on the Western Cape. And for us, we see the entire Western Cape as an investment proposition, not just, even though we've got concentration within the Cape Town metro, that's also by design. But, we've kind of, we're spreading our wings to the Southern Cape, and we see the entire province as an opportunity, given the quality of infrastructure. And very much so, you look at the SA macro as it stands today, you look excluding the Western Cape, the cycle is downwards. It's deteriorating from a municipal perspective. You look at the Western Cape, it's counter-cyclical to where the general cycle is. It's actually going up. And you can see it clearly by how much money the municipalities are spending on infrastructure in the Western Cape versus what's available in the rest of the country. And also you see it reflecting in the way that the market rates the different property funds by their geographical exposure. If you look at the rating on a forward yield of call it a growth point versus a Spear, our growth point unfortunately has been taking a couple of hits lately, but they could be trading at a 14% forward yield, where Spear's trading at a 9.9, 10% forward yield, which is a rating. And it's not necessarily because we necessarily better than them. It's purely just because the risk is very different,
Okay. Explain forward yield in simple terms for the people who are listening who don't understand what it means.
So every REIT, to qualify as a REIT, you have to pay out a minimum of 75% of your profit, and also 75% of your income must be rental income.
Okay.
So effectively, we pay a dividend to our shareholders every 6 months, and that dividend will basically, if you take the dividend on an annualized basis over the share price, that'll give you a percentage, which is your return. So effectively, if we are paying 80 cents to our shareholders and the share price is trading at 8 Rand, we're trading on a forward yield of 10%. And then you can kind of be a bit more scientific, and then do on a rolling forward yield basis, you can kind of project. So if a company gives a forecast, we plan on growing our distributable income per share by 3% or 4%, then you can kind of make some assumptions as to how that forward yield would grow, because you're kind of getting your income on a 6-monthly basis. So one of the things that obviously COVID introduced into the South African REIT landscape was introduction of a payout ratio. So where a REIT is very tax efficient when it pays out 100% of its profit, but when it starts to cut its payout ratio, there's an unintended tax consequence. So you get what you call a distributable income per share, which is your 100% of your profit, but then you can elect to cut away up to 75% and retain for CapEx, because your collections might not be where they are at that point in time, et cetera, et cetera. So now you have a environment where you report on what they call a distributable income per share, which, as I said, is 100% of your profit. And then you report on what your payout ratio is. And generally the market will then rate you on your payout, on what they receive.
Got you.
Yeah. So hopefully that was.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive into some tactics from Quintin that he uses in his personal and professional life to operate at the levels that you do. Stay tuned.